reporting journey as he goes from time to time, so he had asked me if I would be willing to fill in, and of course always very humble to teach in his place because he is very knowledgeable about everything that he does. And when you get the book and the guy who's teaching the class got his name on the book, that's kind of an indication maybe he knows what he's talking about. When I was in college, I took speech class and didn't want to at the time, but it's come in handy since then. But first day in class, I looked at the textbook, and then I looked at the name of the guy who was teaching it, and he wrote the book. I thought, ooh. And then sure enough, he walks in, and he's perfect posture and not a hair out of place and perfectly dressed. And I thought, my Southern English is not going to go very well in this class. I'm sure he's going to rip me. But I learned a lot in there, and he was very patient with us. So that turned out to be well. So maybe tonight will too. But praying for Brother Brooks and as he makes his journey, and hopefully he'll be successful and have a safe trip back to us. He did tell me, he says, when he asked me if I would teach, he said, I'm giving you an easy one. So I'm throwing you a soft toss up there. So, maybe you won't strike out if I throw one up there and lob it. So I'm lobbing you an easy one. And we're in Psalms 23, the 23rd Psalm. So that was a good one. And we're going to try to get through that one and get into Psalms 29 tonight too. Try to cover two and keep on his path there as he's a clip of trying to get things knocked out. So we'll just begin by reading, and I'm going to read it from the King James Version. I think this is probably appropriate for this one. 23rd Psalms is probably arguably the most beloved passage in the whole Old Testament, and I think to read it in that King James would be good for us. So it's only six verses. It says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So as you can see, and as our book says, this is a psalm of trust, of comfort. And in it, David describes in great poetic detail how God provides for us and protects us at all times. David's called a man after God's own heart, and he had been through some tough times. And some of the things that he tells in this and relates to in this psalm directly was things he had experienced, the pursuit, and also the times when he had it hard. So he really speaks from the heart, I feel like, here. Of course, it's inspired word of God, but just his life experience was that way too. Mine or not, I've never owned a sheep, and I don't know a whole lot about them other than what I've researched and what I've heard. I did have a goat one time, and it was the orneriest, most hard-headed animal I've ever had, and we only had one, and after I had that one, I never wanted another one. So we kept it tied out down the fence line to kind of keep everything eat down, and had it on a stake and a chain and a kind of a dog collar around its neck there, and it had plenty to eat and kept it water and all that kind of stuff. But if there was a little stub sticking up that much, it would get wrapped around that thing and be on its knees by the time I went to check on it that afternoon. It was just, and it didn't want to move. So sheep, maybe a little bit like that. So we'll study about them as we go through. We're going to break it down verse by verse and kind of see some of the things, some of the imagery, and some of the things David's talking about here. So let's begin with verse 1. First of all, David writes the psalm from the perspective of the Lord as a shepherd and we as his sheep. Although David had had a lot of experience as a shepherd boy himself, so he understood that relationship very well. Sheep in general are timid, anxious, kind of defenseless creatures that need leadership, need protection at all times in order for them to survive. Wild sheep are a little different, but tame sheep, they are, that if without a shepherd, they're probably not going to make it very long. That's the picture that David begins to paint, is that the Lord is our shepherd, and we are the sheep, and we are in need of his guidance, of his protection, and that he loves and cares for us just like the shepherd does for his sheep. So we'll get into more of the details as we go along with that. But, that's kind of the mindset he begins with, the word picture he begins to paint, that God is our shepherd and we are his sheep. In verse 2, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. That word translated here as lie down is not what we think about as lying down taking a nap. It's a word that's only translated when it has to do with animals, and especially pastoral animals like this. And one thing we as you're reading said about sheep is that they're, like I said, they're very timid, very nervous creatures, kind of like deer. If you're a deer hunter, you've been out there, they're constantly on the watch looking. They're pretty much defenseless, so their defense is to be on the watch, to be timid, to be nervous. So in order for them to get them to lie down in this place, they have to be completely at ease and have to feel completely safe. So here, this maketh me to lie down in green pastures. We can rest assured, we can feel safe that as God is our shepherd, that we're able to lie down and rest without any fear of harm. Also there in that he says in green pastures, that word is translated, indicates real tender shoots that come up. So it's that very choice young grass. It's easy to eat, full of nutrients, the best nutrients possible. Sheep kind of, when they eat, they graze, they bite the grass down very close to the ground. They've got teeth on the bottom and kind of a tough gum on top, so they can snip it off there pretty good. And because of that, they'll overgraze an area if they stay in one spot too long. So it's up to the shepherd to keep them rotated among the different available pasture lands. If you've got sheep yourself in your pasture, you need more than one pasture. You need to divide it up into lots so you can rotate them from place to place and give that other grass time to grow back. So here he shows that as that God provides for us. He knows what's best for us. He knows what we need, what nutrients we need, and he keeps us moving in the direction where we need, so we'll have the very best that we can have. The still waters. I didn't know this until I started reading about it, but it kind of makes sense. But the still waters here is very significant. We think of that as being calm, and it is. But for sheep, that's even more than just being calm. Due to the fact that they have that big, heavy coat of wool, they're basically like a sponge. And if they get into quick rushing water, they're going to get waterlogged, and that swift water is going to carry them away, and they're going to die. So they don't like to be around water that's moving. They like still water. So again, for us, that signifies that as his sheep, that he keeps us in places where it's calm, where we're safe, where we got everything that we need. He says, I shall not want. So we're going to be prepared for everything. He's got it for us. He's taking care of us. Verse 3, he restoreth my soul. Here, that soul can also be translated as life. Because, again, of that heavy coat, sheep sometimes, if they get down and lay down, they can roll over, and they're almost like a turtle that gets flipped on its back and can't get back up. They have to have somebody to help them. So the shepherd has to be on the watch for that. And these sheep, if they're to the point in their life where they have a big, heavy wool coat and they lay down, they'll need some help getting back on their feet, similar to us. From time to time, we get down. We're down, and it feels like we can't get back on our own feet. We need God there. We need that shepherd to help us get back up, get us on our feet, and get us going again. And when you're down, you're an easy target for predators. So, if a wolf came along or a bear, a lion, whatever, and sheep just lying there, it can't even run. So that's an easy meal right there. Same way for us. If the devil catches us down, things are not going well, we're an easy target. So God, as our shepherd, is always there to help us back on our feet. Second part of that verse says, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness. Indicating there to us that as our shepherd, he guides us in the way we should go. Sheep are known to wander. That's kind of what they're famous for. And other thing is they will blindly follow a crowd. I found a newspaper article, and it was talking about in Turkey, where there was a large group of sheep, and there was some the shepherds there. I don't know if they were young or whatever, but they kind of took their eye off the sheep for a little while and went to eat breakfast and turned their back on them for just a little bit. And in the course of that, the sheep wandered, and they would just kind of follow the leader. The first one fell off a 50-foot deep ravine. The rest of them just kept following to the point that 400 sheep fell to their death. Now, that's bad. That's in today's market, they said that's about $75,000 worth of sheep lost over one mistake. That's not all the story. The next 1,100 sheep followed them over the path too, but they survived because the first 400 cushioned their fall, so they didn't die. So, like us, We tend to follow the crowd. We like to be like everybody around us. In those days, one of the problems with God's people was they would try to follow along and be like the unbelievers around them. God warned them about that, about not being like the people that they had moved in there close to, but they still kind of wanted to be that. They wanted a king. We know that part before David ever even got to be king, before Saul got to be king. We want a king. Everybody else got a king. We want a king, so sheep tend to follow. And like that, we follow along, tend to follow the path too. So without God to guide us as a shepherd, we'll fall off the cliff and we'll follow everybody else too. Probably your mama told you that growing up. You say, Mama, I want to do so-and-so. Why? Well, everybody else is doing it. Well, if everybody else jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff? I'm sure you heard that same speech. All of us, that's a standard mama joke, I think, or story, not really a joke. She meant it, but the point they make to us. Verse 4 says, the valley of the shadow of death. That shadow of death, or again, that can be translated as darkness. And that's used many times in the Bible. As a sheet from that reference, that's a place where predators could hide in the darkness, leap out at you. Satan can lie in wait and attack us. The Bible associates darkness with evil many, many times. I wrote down a couple of those we can look at. Ephesians 6, chapter 12. It says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. So we can relate to that today. We see that, dark forces and powers and authorities throughout the world today and some of the things that's going on. Then in Colossians 1, verses 13 and 14, it says, for he has rescued us from the domain of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So those are just a couple. There's too many of those for us to read. We'd be doing that all night long. But many, many times he relates darkness to evil. In there also he says, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. This refers to the fact that we're going to go through some tough times in life. Sometimes that shepherd, he had to lead those sheep through places where it was dangerous to get to the next good pasture. And but he was always there with them. They were always safe. We're not promised a rose garden. Actually, as a matter of fact, we're promised we're going to have difficulties in this life. And we just need to remember and realize that in those tough times, God's there with us. Take comfort in that knowledge that in the good and the bad, he's always there. He's present in the dark valleys as he is in the green pastures. It kind of relates back to us as kids also. It's normal for little kids to be afraid of the dark. Little research, they said usually kids begin to be afraid of the dark around age 3, depending on the child, but when their imagination starts kicking into gear and they start imagining what might be out there. Fear is our natural response to defend ourselves against a perceived threat. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like pain. Pain, we don't like pain, but it's telling us something's wrong. If you fell and your ankles hurt, it swells up, it hurts, don't walk on it. It's telling you it's hurt. Don't work on it. Don't be on that. So same thing with the dark. And it's not necessarily, we all know this, it's not the darkness that's scary. It's that inability to see any potential threats that are lurking there. Leaves us feeling vulnerable and exposed to what's out there that we can't see. I know as a little child, I'll admit it, I was scared of the dark, okay? I think mine lasted beyond 3. I was a little older than that before I quit being scared of the dark. I guess maybe when I started getting out in the woods at night and hunting and stuff, and then I was like, well, I'm all right, nothing out here. But as a little kid, I was scared of the dark. I told y'all this about my dad before. My dad worked in the mines, and he worked the evening shift and afternoon shift. But part of my job as the oldest of the 3 boys, especially the much older, was to keep the coal filled up in the heater. I don't know how in this area, but down where I grew up, coal was a very common way of heating your house. And we had an old Stokermatic heater that sat in the living room, and it was pretty tall. And I had to carry coal and put that in there. That was my job, to keep the coal hopper full and to clean out the ashes. And we had a 5-gallon plastic bucket to do that in. Well, I wasn't big enough to carry a full 5-gallon bucket. So it took me more than one trip, and I can't tell you how much I dreaded walking out to the far back corner of the yard where there was no light to fill up that coal bucket and get back. And one reason I got stronger, I guess, is I got to be a kid, because I got where I would carry 2 5-gallon buckets, half full each, so I'd have to cut down the number of trips I had to make, so I didn't have to be in the dark so long. But that fear of the dark motivated me, and I couldn't wait to get back to the light. And that's how we should be with God. We don't want to be in the dark. We want to be in the light where He is. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The shepherd's staff is a long, we've all saw the picture of that if we hadn't saw it in person, but a long wooden rod with a hook on it. It's tool still in use today by people who do traditional sheep herding. Allows the shepherd to guide the sheep, then kind of tap them a little bit with it and on the shoulder there and get them going in the right direction. Lift them from a hole. They can turn around the hook and catch underneath them and pick them up if they need to. And also they use it as a tool, as a weapon to fend off attackers. So, just as children feel safe when they know our mom or dad is around to protect them from anything that might be a threat, so the sheep are comforted by the presence of that shepherd. If they know he's there, he's got the staff and the rod, they're fine. David was familiar with using that rod and staff to protect his flock. We read the story where he goes and volunteers to fight Goliath. And, King Saul is like, you're just a little boy, you're not a warrior. You're just a punk, What can you do? And so he told him the story. He said, David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him and smote him and delivered him out of his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. So, again, David had some knowledge. He'd had some experience with using this tool to defend his sheep. And he knew that God was there with him in those tough times. And because of that, he was not afraid to go up against Goliath, the Philistine, either. And, again, that's a lesson for us. In verse 5, he says, and he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. So that one's a little different, something that we may not completely understand there. But preparing a table here, when these people were out in the field eating, they didn't have a table to eat on. They had like a mat that they rolled out, kind of like a picnic. So they rolled out that mat or out that picnic blanket, and they sat down and ate. So here he's saying, God is with me to the point that I have safety with him as my shepherd, that even when my enemies are near, I can sit down and have a picnic, okay? It's not like I'm sitting here and I'm grabbing a bite and I'm looking over my shoulder and like, where am I going to be attacked like that deer, sitting there just glancing back and forth, take a few bites, look up and see if there's a hunter around or anything. So he spreads that thing out, and we just sit there and we just enjoy it. Even though the enemy's at the gate, we're fine. Nothing's going to hurt me as long as he's here. So preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemies is significant, because he's saying here that I don't have to fear. There's no hurry. There's no confusion, no disturbance. The enemy's at the door, but we can just sit down and enjoy a perfectly peaceful meal because we have God as our shepherd. Also in verse 5, it says, thou anointest my head with oil. Now, I think that can refer, in different commentators I read and different articles I read, this had different opinions, but I think this probably maybe even has a double meaning here. But one thing, the shepherd would use oil and pour it on the head of the sheep as a treatment for or protection against biting flies and parasites. So, they didn't have that spray that you could spray to keep them off of them. And sometimes if you got cattle now, you may have a place where it has a big rub hanging across, a place where they come through, and it's got chemical on there, and when they rub through it rubs on their back. Well, what they did is they took this oil, and there's different types of oil they use, but they would rub it on the head, and that would help as a defense against those pests that were bothering them, because without it, the sheep would get so aggravated at those that sometimes they just start butting their head against a rock or a tree trying to get those things off to the point they would hurt themselves. Like I said, they're kind of like that goat I had. They're not real smart, okay? They need a little help. So they had that issue where if you didn't have that, if you didn't treat them, then they would have problems. But so here, not only does he keep the enemies, the big enemies away, like bears and lions and wolves, but even the small enemies, even the bugs, away from you. And the other reference to that could be is that in those times and culture, people frequently anointed their visitors with some kind of fragrant perfume. We've read those stories about in the Bible, especially about Jesus, where they anointed his feet with oil. It was very, very expensive. So, that fragrant perfume, that was a sign that you were welcome, that you were honored guest. And also it says there, and he filleth my cup till it runneth over. And they did that too. So when you had a guest, you would put a little oil, give them some oil to put on them. Supposedly that smell would relax them, I guess, like lilac or whatever we have today, some of those essential oils some people use. And also you would fill their cup. And when you fill their cup, you didn't just fill it halfway or even to the top. You let it run over a little bit just to show that, hey, while you're with me, it's abundance. You get all you want, all you need. So that's how we are with God as our shepherd. He protects us, sets us a table in the presence of our enemies, anoints us with oil, and also our cup runneth over. We have all that we could possibly want. Then also in verse 6, it says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Look at that very first word there, surely. Now, surely tells us that this is a fact. Not a hope, not a possibility, but this is a fact. Surely goodness and mercy is going to follow us. If we choose to be a member of his flock, of one of his sheep, then he's going to be there with us no matter what, no doubt. Next two words, goodness and mercy. Look at goodness first. God is perfectly good in his character, flawlessly good in his actions. He's not capable of being anything but good. Mercy means that his love is unconditional. Even when we're faithless, he remains faithful to us. This sermon this morning from Ben, he touched on some of these same things. When we stray, as sheep do from time to time, he still cares for us. He knew that we're going to stray. That's we're weak human beings. We're going to sin daily. But when we do, he's there to gently bring us back to where we need to go. One commentator painted a different picture, and I kind of like it. He likened goodness and mercy to two sheepdogs that help the shepherd. So you got the shepherd, and he's got these two sheepdogs. I've had some herding dogs before, and it's amazing to watch that, just what's bred into them, that they just tend to herd things up. I know even when kids are out in the yard playing, those herd dogs will get out there, and they'll herd the kids up sometimes, keep them away from the road. So it's bred into them. But he says goodness and mercy are like two sheepdogs. When we go astray, they bring us back. When we slow down, they spur us on, constantly driving us closer to the good shepherd. So I thought that was a pretty neat picture that he painted there too. And that word follow, it says, surely goodness shall follow me all the days of my life. Another translation of that is pursuit, not just follow, not just patiently behind, but pursuing you. So that shows the steadfastness of the shepherd in keeping after his flock. So even when David found himself in life-threatening situations, which he did many times, not just as a shepherd, but then later when Saul would get mad at him and he had to flee and hide from Saul, and then later when his son Absalom turned against him, he had to flee. So David was familiar with being pursued, but here that pursuit takes on a positive and not a negative. But he says God's goodness was always close behind. Whatever his trial, his loving kindness was constantly trailing him. In the end, all the days of my life. So there will never be a single day which he's not with us. Shepherds can't take a vacation. You can't just leave the sheep out there. And if you out there farm, you know what I mean. You can't take a day off. Animals still got to be fed. Eggs got to be gathered. Crops got to be tended. There is no vacation day. You might get somebody else take your place, but you can't just let it sit. It has to be done. So the two parts of God's love, goodness and mercy, will be nipping our heels all day, every day, for the rest of our life. We can never escape the loyal love of a shepherd. Another story is told kind of likening this, and it's probably not a great description, but it does kind of prove a point. But so there was a counselor, a preacher one time. He was a counselor, kind of like Ben. But he had this lady who came to him, and she was very upset. And after talking with her for a few minutes, he can tell that she had a mental condition. She was delusional. But she said, there's these two men that are following me. They're following me 24 hours a day. When I walk down the street, they're behind me. If I go to get on the bus, they're behind me. They followed me here to your office. He says, you got to help me. So after seeing what was her issue, he said, I think I got a solution. To put her at ease, he said, those two men, he said, those are David's men. And he opened up and read Psalms 23:6 to her. And he said, their names are goodness and mercy. He said, so they're following you. Those two guys, goodness and mercy, they're from David, and they're there to help you. he says she was so relieved. She left with a peace of mind. She said, I wondered what their names were. And she never had any issue after that. She was fine with them following her as long as they wasn't after her. They was just there to help her. So that comfort that she had, knowing that goodness and mercy were following her, that's kind of the comfort we need to have, is that we've got those two things following us at all times, God's goodness and his mercy. And then the last part of that says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know, again, like I said a while ago, we make the decision to be a member of God's flock. But to do that, we have to surrender control of our life to him and allow him to guide us where he'd have us to go, trusting him to provide and protect us. We have to trust him completely at all times, good and bad. And it's easy to trust him in the good times. It's tough in the bad times. Do you ever, when things are going bad, you get mad at God? I think if we admit it to ourselves, we've probably all done that one time. Why are you letting this happen to me? Why are you doing this, God? And I think we maybe all had that question from once or twice in our life. But, you know, we have to believe that he's there with us, right beside of us, through the good times and the bad. Some of y'all probably remember this, but there used to be a car tag that was real common. I hadn't saw one in a long time, but it says, God is my co-pilot. Y'all remember that one? Somebody might have had a comment about that. He said, if God's your co-pilot, you need to change seats, okay? You need to let him be the pilot, you be the co-pilot. So instead, you need to steal a line from the lyrics of Carrie Underwood's song, Let Jesus Take the Wheel. Okay, so don't let God be your co-pilot. Let him be the pilot. Let him be the shepherd. Let him guide us where we should go. Only when we do that can we experience that peace and that comfort that David talks about here in the 23rd Psalm. And I found a little poem this guy had, and I think it kind of goes along with our attitude sometimes of how we should be, but how we really are. And the title of it is Let Go and Let God. It says, as children bring their broken toys and tears for us to mend, I brought my broken dreams to God because he was my friend. But then instead of leaving him in peace to work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. At last I snatched him back and said, God, how can you be so slow? He said, my child, what could I do? You never did let go. So instead of trusting God, letting go, letting him do, let God do it, we hang on. We think we've got to solve our own problems. I think as men, we're probably more guilty of this than ladies are. We want to be the fixers. You know, I found with my wife that, you know, she used to tell me things that were bothering her, and I'd try to come up with a solution. And women, ladies, that's really not what you want, is it? You don't want us to fix it. You just want us to listen. Just be concerned. Just be there for you to lean on. We don't have to have an answer. We just have to be a listening ear and a steady rock there that you can lean on. And that's how we have to be with God. You know, we don't have the solution. He didn't make us that way. We weren't made to solve our own problems. We need him. We need each other, just like the sheep need each other. Talk about having sheep. One guy said, if you're having trouble with your sheep, that's probably the problem. You only got one. They're herd animals. You need at least 2 or 3 of them because they do a lot better together. So as Christians, we're like that too. We do better when we're together. We do better when we give up, when we let go and let God and let him handle our problems. Because through that, then, he proves us who he is. And if you're back for a Wednesday night lesson, we're going to talk about that a good bit more in our next habit that we do here on Wednesday night classes on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Christians. We're going to touch on that topic and go a little bit deeper on that one. So that was our 23rd Psalm, and I wanted to spend most of our time with that one tonight. It's the one that's most common to us and most people are familiar with, but just try to bring out a few points that maybe you hadn't heard on that one. Our other one is a little bit longer in length, but it won't take us as long to get through, I don't think, and that's Psalm 29. Psalms 29. It's also going to read it from the King James Version, and I'll read it to you first, and then we'll have just a few comments on it. Verse 1 says, give unto the Lord, O you mighty, give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. The voice of the Lord is upon the waters. The God of glory thundereth. The Lord is upon many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaketh the cedars. Yea, the Lord breaketh the cedars of Lebanon. He maketh them also to skip like a calf, Lebanon and Syrian like a young unicorn. The voice of the Lord divideth the flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shaketh the wilderness. The Lord shaketh the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord maketh the hinds to calve, and discovereth the forest, and his temple doth every one seek of his glory. The Lord sitteth upon the flood, yea, the Lord sitteth king forever. The Lord will give unto his people, the Lord will bless his people with peace. So in this psalm, David is seeing a storm. He's witnessing a storm. And in that storm, he sees not fear of the storm, but he sees the power of God in that storm. Is that a God that can create this storm and control it? How powerful is he? It's not a cry for help in this psalm. It's just a pure praise for the awesome power of God. And I think we overuse that word awesome in our culture today, but awesome just means full of awe. We're in awe. We're just, our jaw drops seeing how the power of God and what he can do. As a science teacher, that's one thing I really enjoy about science is understanding a little bit about nature and how God does things. And my favorite part in biology when I teach that is about genetics and DNA, and something we hadn't really known about all that many years. But when you see just how simple that little code is, that codes for every protein that we're made out of, that determines everything about us, everything is determined. How we look, how our body functions, everything by that code. And it's based on 4 simple little bases, and the way they pair up in code is the whole thing of that. It's kind of like God pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting you see, okay, this is kind of how I did that, okay? This is how I made for all the different types of life that there are and all the different possibilities they could be, is just by how I mix up those little codes in there, in the DNA and the cell, the nucleus of every cell in every organism. It's pretty neat. So same thing here. He's saying just in that storm, some of these people are storm chasers. They like to chase tornadoes. We get enough of them around here. I feel like I'm being chased by tornadoes myself. I don't want to chase tornadoes. I've been too close to too many of them and don't care to be close to them any more than I have to be. But here he's seeing that awesomeness in the power of a storm. In verse 1, David warns the mighty ones to look away from themselves and toward God. He says, "Give unto the Lord, O you mighty ones." So you give, instead of thinking you're so great, look how great God is that he can create this storm and control it. There's repetition, emphasis, obviously, in the word Lord in here. It appears 18 times in these short little 11 verses. So he does that repetition for emphasis. He's stressing who God is, that the Lord. And here and Mike's talked about this in his lesson here before, is that they use the word Lord in all caps because they would reverence. They wouldn't even say the word Yahweh. They replaced it with this word Lord. So he does that over and over, saying how great God is, and it's so great I'm not even going to say the name that we have for him. So here he replaces that Yahweh with Lord, out of respect. In verse 2, he calls on us to recognize and acknowledge that covenant relationship we have with God, that man should bow in honor of the beauty of his holiness. He says, give Lord the glory due unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of his holiness. Beauty can mean different things. Sometimes we say, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. My wife's told me I'm good looking. I appreciate that. I'm glad she thinks that. I don't really see that when I look in the mirror, but as long as she does, that's all that matters, So beauty in the eye of the beholder. Different things appear beautiful, different things, but the beauty of nature sometimes, even in a storm, if you just see that from a distance, if you're not having to experience it, when the front's moving across and you see the lightning and you see all that, it is pretty amazing just to watch that and recognize what God is capable of. So here he's saying, bow in the honor of the beauty of his holiness. In verse 3 and 4, here it says, his authoritative voice is over the many waters. So he's signifying his strength and his power. He associates God's voice with thunder here. And David sees the power of God in nature. The power in a storm is amazing. If we could find a way, and scientists have been trying to do this for a long time, if we could find a way to harness the power in just a thunderstorm, we wouldn't have to worry about coal or nuclear or windmills or any of this stuff. If we could harness that somehow, we'd have all the power we need. A typical just old garden variety thunderstorm that blows across produces about 10 million kilowatt hours of electricity. 10 million kilowatt hours. You know, if you have a way of making your own electricity, if you've got a water mill or a windmill or solar, whatever, the power company is obligated to buy your excess from you. So instead of you buying from them, if I can make more than I use, they have to buy it from me. Well, if I could find that, you're talking about being a millionaire, I could sell all that back to them. I'd be set. I wouldn't have to worry about paying my power bill. They'd worry about paying me for the power. Okay, but that's also equivalent to about 20 kiloton nuclear bombs. That is amazing to think about how much. We probably saw pictures of the atomic bomb test, and maybe even the actual where they dropped it on Japan back in World War II. But you know that's amazing, that power that is there, and God is capable of handling all that just with His voice. There in verses 5 through 9 speaks of the power of God or Lord over nature. The Cedars of Lebanon, we see that mentioned there. The voice of the Lord breaketh the cedars, yea, the Lord breaketh the cedars of Lebanon. In that part of the world, the cedars of Lebanon were renowned as being these symbols of strength that grew there. It's kind of like the redwoods that we have in California. I've never been there, but I saw pictures. I know people have been, but you know, just the enormity of that tree and how big and powerful that tree is. He says, you know, those trees are big and they're strong, but that's nothing with God. You know, he breaks them, just splinters them like toothpicks. That's nothing to Him. So he uses that example of something that these people are familiar with those great trees, and sees how that power that is in there. If you've ever been close to a lightning bolt, you understand that. I've been almost hit by lightning twice. They say lightning never strikes twice, and it's never struck me, but it's come close twice. Once we were out working in a pasture, and there was one big tree out in the middle of the whole pasture, and it wasn't even really stormy, but it just started clouding up. But lightning struck that tree, and I was probably, 20 or 30 feet from it. But I could sense that something was about to happen, and it's like the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I kind of hunkered down. But I'm proof that I'm not faster than lightning, because before I could move, it hit that tree, and it split that tree wide open, and bark flew everywhere, and I hit the ground. I didn't even think about running anymore. I just hit the ground, So that was pretty scary. And then one time we were at football practice a few years ago when I was at Winfield, and out on the practice field there's one old gnarly oak tree back there behind that middle school gym, and it's barely got any limbs on it. It's been struck by lightning I don't know how many times. But one day it was stormy, and now at practice you have to keep a little weather thing with you, and if lightning has struck within so many miles of where you are, you have to go in for 30 minutes. And you have to delay practice. They do the same thing with the game. If lightning strikes within so far, the officials will clear the field. You got to go in. Well, we had cleared the field and had the kids back in the locker room and walked back out to the door and just standing there and just looked out, look at the clouds. And by the time I did that, lightning hit that tree. And just splinters and bark flew everywhere again. And again, it's like I don't ever want to be close to that again. So just the power of that lightning bolt and God's ability to use it to destroy things in nature and show the power that He has. Even in mythology from other people, from their false gods, they use that as a symbol of their power, and that's when their gods are angry. Thor for the Vikings, and I think Zeus in the Greek, when they're throwing down lightning bolts, that's them saying that God's angry at you. Then in verse 10, 11, here David saw the storm and the pouring rain, and it reminded him of the great floods in the days of Noah and the power of God's word to bring forth the flood. That was, if you think about it and you read that story, we need to go back and read that every now and then, but the power of that, not only did God cause it to rain, but He broke up the fountains of the deep, it said. And only in the last few years have we proved that we've discovered that there's water underneath. There's huge, basically oceans of water underneath the earth's crust in certain places. And they say there's as much water underneath the ocean as there is in it. I hadn't saw that myself, but it's there, we know when we drill a well, we go down and hit an aquifer. That's nothing compared to what this is. But, God He caused that water to come down and also to come up. And that's how the earth was flooded with that much water in so quick amount of time. But he saw that pouring rain, and it reminded him of the power God had, and he destroyed during the flood. And that throne that God sat on then, He's still there. And that same judgment that He passed on man then, He's still there. He promises he'll never do it with water again, but he has that power. You hear a lot of scientists now, and they're all worried about, one day the sun's going to supernova, or we're going to get hit by a comet or something, and the earth's going to be burned up. I said, yeah, I already knew that. If you read the scripture, that's how it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be the sun flare up or a comet hit us, but God said we're not going to be destroyed by flood. It's going to burn up. So, yeah, that's how it's going to happen. I can't tell you what the source of that's going to be other than God, but it is going to happen one day. So, that power that God has, here he sees that. So, as we finish up tonight, and we may finish just a little early, maybe about 4 or 5 minutes, but ask yourself this question. The power, he said, he likens it here to the God's voice, to thunder. Does it feel like thunder to us when we hear the word of God read or we hear it preached? How does that affect us? Does it shake us to our core when we hear those things? Or are we kind of bored? Have we heard it so many times that we're kind of numb to it, If we're not, if we hadn't done that, then maybe we need to go back and look at a storm and think about the power of God and notice just how powerful he is. I think then when we read it, especially Psalms like this, that it will have an effect on us. I read one place where they said that in the early days that when they read the psalm, they would read it in the temple or wherever, but they would do it during a storm so that the people could feel the power and get the effect of that. And imagine reading this as it was storming outside, as lightning was flashing and thunder rolled. I think that would bring it home to us. Sometimes just your windows shake, when the thunder or lightning is really close to us. And I think that would kind of wake us up a little bit to just how powerful God is. I think us, as members of the church, maybe even more, when we've heard it for so many years, we kind of get numb to it sometimes. It kind of gets to be old hat, and it doesn't affect us like it should. We need to take a fresh look at it sometimes. We've all heard the term deja vu. It's when you see something, and I feel like I saw that before. There's another term called vu jade, and it's just the opposite. It's when I see something I've saw 1,000 times, but I see it from a whole different perspective, and I have a different look at that. So maybe instead of deja vu, we need a little vu jade, where we see this power of God, and we kind of look at it from a different point of view. From these storms, I heard a guy talking about one time, and had anything to do with this lesson. He said he was flying. He does a lot of flying for his job. And he says, I really don't like to fly. He said, I don't like taking off and landing. He said, once I get up there, it's okay. But he said, one day I was flying, and we were over, the pilot climbed up above a thundercloud. And I was looking down at that, and I could see the lightning in the cloud and all that. And he said, I shouldn't be seeing this. This is not the point of view I should see. But he said it affected me, and it did what we're talking about here. It gave him a different perspective on the power of God by not being under that cloud, but by being over it and seeing the power and how much power God had in that storm. And just that, imagine that's a tiny little speck of what he's capable of what he can do and what he can do in our life. So as we look around nature, I encourage you to see God in nature, see him in everything that he does. The beauty of his creation. Sometimes just, get out. Most of us, me especially, spend too much time in the house. We didn't used to do that when I was younger. I used to be outside and hunting and fishing and doing things. But if you get out there, you kind of feel that connection a little bit to nature, and you see God in those things. And, next time it's stormy, maybe you just want to stand out and look a little bit and kind of get a feel for that. So appreciate you being here tonight. Hopefully gave you a little different perspective on these two, and a little something you can think about and take with you. And like I said, as far as a couple of topics we touched on, we're going to get a little bit deeper into that with our Wednesday night lesson, and encourage you, if you can be, if you're in another class, that's different, but if you can be a part of our study on Wednesday night, be with us, and we'll talk more about that. Let's bow to us as we pray. Father, we thank you for the day. We thank you for this opportunity we've had to be here tonight. Thank you for the power of your word, for us, the hope, Father, that as we read it, that we would consider the power of the storm and know that is a power from you, that you are all-powerful and almighty, and we worship you with that proper respect. Father, pray that you'd be with all those who are suffering tonight. Pray that we would look to you and know that you are that comfort, you're that good shepherd, that you're with us through the good times and the bad, that you're always right there beside us. always there to care for us and provide all of our needs and our wants. Father, be for those who are not able to be with us tonight, those who are sick, those who are hurting. Father, be with Brother Brooks and his wife as they're out. Have a safe journey, a successful journey, be back with us soon. Be with the Christians in Europe, especially those in Ukraine and the surrounding countries there, that you would be with them and comfort them. I know that they are going through a storm right now. Father, also that you be with we're to pray for enemies, pray that you be with the Russian people. Many of those are not in favor of this war. Pray that you be with them as many of the sanctions that are being levied is hurting the common man more than it is the leaders, but pray that you be with them and also help them to weather the storm also. Father, forgive us our sins and finally save us in heaven is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.